Hi, welcome to week 5. So far in this course, we have talked about the psychological and sociological issues related to aging. We've discussed the life course perspective, which says to us that we cannot consider what the experience of aging will be like without considering the entire course of our lives, the decisions and the experiences that we have in our younger years forms and shapes how our older years will be experienced. We've discussed that older adults need to have purpose and meaning in their lives, and that as they transition out of certain roles in their lives, like their work role or being a parent, that this can be a challenge for older adults to, in essence, recreate who they are in this world and what they bring to this world and their meaning and contributions to society. And we also, hopefully, busted the myth that, contrary to popular belief, older people, or I should say many older people, don't want to disengage from society. They want to stay a part of the mainstream of society. And the disengagement theory puts forward that society and the older adults mutually want to disengage from each other. Society essentially says, you're not working anymore, you're not parenting your children anymore, we really don't need you, so you can just fade off into the woodwork of society. So we don't really think that that's true, do we? We don't think that all older people want to disengage from society, and your discussion boards on that topic were very interesting. A lot of you shared personal examples of people that you know in your lives that have decided to withdraw from society and live out their lives in a very isolative way. But many of you also, and more of you, had examples of people that you know that take the opportunities of being older and recreate themselves, perhaps into a second career or an encore career, as it's often called, or they do volunteer work or attend to their grandchildren. And many examples were given of older adults who don't want to fall into the fray of society. So as the baby boomers continue to age, as a society, we're going to have to deal with this reality that we are going to have a lot of people who are still going to be very interested in staying a part of this society. And what are we going to do to support that? So there were a lot of topics such as this covered in the psychology and sociology of aging. Also, we learned that people can actually learn new things, old dog, new tricks, but they might learn differently than we do. And how must we adapt in society for that reality that older people can continue to learn new things and teach things and continue to contribute to society? Then we moved into the biology of aging, the actual changes that take place in our bodies, and the various theories that are out there about what aging actually is. Is it reversible? We've talked about longevity and some of the research that's been done along those lines of what are the things that tend to contribute to people living longer. And we tuned into the blue zones to learn a little bit more about lifestyle and how that can contribute to longevity. So for the second half of this course, we're going to be spending a lot of time on the economics of aging. And it's a huge topic, and it is continuing to be a more important and prevalent topic because we are an aging society and we have going to have more older people. What is that statistic? That 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. And as people reach that point of retirement and they lose their health insurance benefits through their company or their employer, they go on to this system called Medicare. And that's a health insurance system by the federal government. And so now the federal government is involved in the healthcare delivery and payment of healthcare services for older adults. So you can believe that economics of our aging society is on front and center of our national agenda. Now, interesting, you don't hear a lot about it today, but back in the Clinton years, back in the 1990s, it was very well known that we were going to have and be dealing with this silver tsunami and this wave of older people that are going to be coming into our society. And attempts were made back in the 90s under the Clinton administration to reform our healthcare system. Well, that initiative failed miserably. But what we now have is a continued attempt by our federal government to find ways to curb the growth of our healthcare expense in this society. And how do elders get wrapped up in all of that? How does that affect the lives of our elders? So we discussed the topic of healthcare rationing. Do we need to ration healthcare for older people? Is it okay for a 95-year-old person to have an aortic valve transplant? So these are some of the ethical issues that are beginning to emerge in our healthcare system around the care of our elders. Also, the topic of protecting elders from themselves, protecting them from bad choices, is a big topic because as a society, we tend to think that older adults have somehow lost the right to make decisions for themselves because they are old. And children, such as myself, think often that we need to be sure that mom takes care of her diabetes and gets out and walks 10,000 steps every day and is active at that senior center and is eating a good diet and is going to the gym and so on and so forth. What do we do if we have elders in our care that decide, you know, I'm diabetic, but I'm going to eat whatever I want? How do we deal with that? Do we just sit back and say, okay, mom, okay, grandma, fine, whatever you want? Or do we have an ethical imperative to step in and make older adults live the kind of lives that we want them to? So elders and decision making is the second part of the readings for this week. When do we step in to protect our elders? Under what circumstances is that appropriate, and what does that look like? You will be looking at also the very, very important topic of elder abuse. I'm sure you do hear about that a lot. You hear about elder abuse most of the time as it relates to living in a nursing home. All you have to do is turn the TV on during the day and hear all of the commercials around elder abuse that occurs in the nursing homes. Well, I'm going to bust that myth too. And I've put in your folder for this week a link to the, I believe it's the National Center on Elder Abuse, that's going to actually show you some statistics about that. And you may find it surprising that elder abuse is more prevalent in the homes, in their own homes, living in the community, than it is in nursing homes. But it's a very difficult thing to measure. So elder abuse is very important. It is important for those that are working in the healthcare industry to understand how to prevent elder abuse. So also in your folder this week is a supplemental elder abuse prevention guide that I used in my nursing facility to train my staff. I'd like you to be familiar with the steps and the types of abuse that are involved with older adults and the steps that we need to take to prevent elder abuse from happening. And then we are going to talk about quality of life for elders and how do we measure that? How do we know if an older adult is experiencing a high quality of life? And what I mentioned before is what I think is high quality living or high quality life may be very different than what an older person thinks. So we have to understand what our older adults in our lives value as quality of life. And it could be very different than what I think. So talking about that issue. Then we go into the topic of end-of-life decision-making. Again, a big part of the healthcare experience is making decisions about treatments and treatment plans for older adults. And I want you to be sure that you understand the difference between physician-assisted death and choosing to forego end-of-life decisions. I said that wrong. Choosing to forego end-of-life treatment. So the distinction is this. You can have an elderly person, let's say, who is relatively healthy, but maybe they are confined to a wheelchair because they have such severe arthritis. They can't walk anymore. They can't drive their car, living in chronic and continual pain that medications don't do a good job of managing. They've lost a lot of their independence. Their spouse has died. Kind of the most depressing scenario you can probably think about. All of that. What if that person decides, I'm done living. I don't want to live like this anymore, and I'm ready to go. Those of you that work in healthcare facilities, especially nursing facilities or assisted living, probably hear this quite a bit. I'm so ready to die. I'm ready whenever God wants to take me. Because there comes a point for many older adults where they are just done living. And there are some states in the United States that permits physician-assisted death. Now, so you're going to read about that, but then you're also going to think about what about an elderly person that chooses to forego treatment? So in the first example, that person's not really dealing with any life-threatening situations. But what if you have an older person who, let's say they're 85, they've just been diagnosed with liver cancer, and the treatment for that is a very aggressive round of chemotherapy, radiation, so on and so forth. And they decide, I'm not going to do that. That is a different scenario than physician-assisted suicide. Ending life-sustaining treatment is the right and the prerogative of every elderly person to decide what they want to put their bodies through, just like we have the right to decide what medications we want to take. Somebody might have high blood pressure, and the doctor says, here, you need to take these pills, and that patient says, I'm not going to take those pills, I'm going to work on my diet, or I'm going to exercise more, or whatever. Every individual has the right to self-determine their healthcare decisions. That includes the elderly. But it seems that as people get older, we lose our awareness of this, and doctors and nurses and family members begin to impose their wishes. I have seen situations in my 30 years of working with frail elders, family members who refuse to accept that their loved one is dying by by insisting on tube feedings, by insisting on aggressive chemotherapy towards the, at the age of 90. And we forget that we're all going to die. That is absolutely a given. So whether we die at 92 or 90, if an elderly person wants to live out their last few months of life without the grueling effects of chemotherapy and radiation, we need to be supporting that decision as a healthcare community. And unfortunately, physicians will often encourage their patients to extend their life as long as possible because doctors think that's what their job is. I don't think that's what a doctor's job is. I think a doctor's job is to help their patients have the highest quality of life that they can. So very interesting topics. There's a lot there in this week's folder, but it's such important topics to discuss when it relates to our elders. The other thing in your folder is a video lecture from me, so you get to see me twice this week, a video lecture on ethics, ethical decision making for healthcare decisions. So please listen to that lecture. It's, I think, about 15 minutes long, something like that. But you will be doing a case study that's also in your folder and using the ethical outline, the decision-making outline to address the case study that's in your folder. So you've got a lot of work ahead of you, but I know you can do it, and you've been great about reaching out with questions and comments and concerns. So feel free to continue to do that, and I will see you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.